Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Dogman tore up my campsite. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm gonna tell you a story that will change your mind about the idea of camping alone, unless you are already against it, in which case it will reinforce that view in your head. My point is you should never ever camp alone the way I do in this story. There are probably 100 reasons why this is true, but the one I plan on focusing on right now is that one person alone cannot defend themselves adequately against a predator the likes of the North American upright walking canid or Dogman. And I learned this firsthand because Dogman tore up my campsite. So I was camping up in the area around O'Neill Lake, which is north of Bliss, Michigan. I was either right near or else inside the Wilderness State Park, but I wasn't staying in any official camping area. In fact, I had managed to avoid almost all humans for days, including park rangers, as I was in pursuit of a little alone time. I had been back staying with my parents for a full year, and I want to be clear, I am not trying to insult my mom or dad or complain about them, but I was sorely in need of some solitude. I'm a 28-year-old male who lost his job and his wife in 2020, and I'm stuck looking for a new path forward in terms of career. I feel like once I know how I'm going to pay the rent, the rest of my life will have a better chance of getting healthy again. In the meantime, I have my parents reminding me that they always knew I had chosen the wrong career. They also constantly remind me that they warned me in advance that I had chosen the wrong wife as well. Now they predict I'll be living with them for the rest of my life, while they simultaneously tell me that they can't wait until I leave. I try not to say mean things back to them because I know that once I have a new job they will chill out. But, as Ram Dass is supposed to have said, if you really think you're so enlightened, go spend 2 weeks living with your parents. I had just spent a full year, and I learned for a fact that I am far from enlightened. Also, I learned that my parents always knew that I'd never become enlightened. So I was in the middle of nowhere, trying even to avoid other hikers and campers because I needed to get other people's voices out of my head. Whatever was happening, I would hear my parents saying, "I told you so," to me for the first few days I was out there. No matter how deep I hiked into the woods, I couldn't stop them from whispering enervating commentary into my ears. When I could silence these voices, I could really begin to appreciate where I was and allow nature to give me a recharge. All of the energy and the will to live that had been sucked out of me by the people I loved and the job I had devoted my life to was slowly seeping back into me, a little more each day. And then, one night, I left my tent to go relieve myself. When I staggered, half asleep, back to where I had been sleeping in my warm, comfortable sleeping bag, I saw what I at first took to be a bear standing among the ruins of my tent, eating something that had once belonged to me. My first reaction was to look around, hoping I had wandered back to someone else's camp. I knew it was mine, though. I could see the colors of the tent in the moonlit night, and I could see my torn-up sleeping bag that no longer appeared as though it would be warm or comfortable. The bear leaned back and stood up on its hind legs, and I simultaneously dipped behind some foliage so as not to be seen. The creature seemed to be stretching and yawning, although the way the body moved made no sense to me at first. I shifted over to my right to hide behind a thick patch of trees and get a better look at that bear in my former camp. When I saw the creature's legs, my mind did a somersault inside my skull. Not only were they too tall for a bear, they were shaped completely wrong. I felt this weird panic inside of myself, like I must still be dreaming. Or else, if I wasn't dreaming, that I must be looking at some sort of mutant or alien animal. The thing looked like a hairy devil man or goat man, a humanoid like a Bigfoot, but with devil legs and big old nasty claws for hands. The demon's face was like a canine, as hateful and feral as anything's head could look. I felt a kind of fear that I hadn't ever felt before, outside of nightmares. I knew that what I was seeing didn't really make any logical sense, and so I was as afraid of what might happen next as I was of the potential dangers a dog-headed, devil-legged man might cause to innocent bystanders and their campsites. Even though it stood like a man and in many ways seemed as though it might be partially human, I saw no signs of intelligence from the neck up. He stood there, tongue hanging out, panting and drooling on himself, the wreckage of my really neat camping gear torn to shreds by his freaking Wolverine claws. What kind of animal invades a human camp like that? What kind of animal would destroy a human encampment without provocation? I wondered if this animal was starving, and I also wondered if this creature might be suffering from some disease which affects the brain or nervous system. If it had rabies, for instance, that might explain its manic behavior. Each succeeding thought that popped into my head made me feel even worse about my situation. I had tossed on my coat and pulled my boots on, but not fastened them. I realized I was now going to have to survive outside with only what I had on me, so I bent down and fastened the boots properly. Then I closed up my jacket and turned around, facing away from the Dogman, and in a direction that I felt certain would lead me to some form of civilization. I didn't have my compass with me, or my flashlight, or my cell phone, though, so I was really mostly thinking with my adrenaline and my growing sense of panic and doom. As you might have guessed, my choice led me deeper into the woods, not out of it. I had no idea of this at the time until I ran into a cabin in the woods that I hadn't seen on my way in. The small one-level dwelling was dark, so I went up and banged on the windows and doors to see if anyone was home. After nobody answered, I went inside and looked around. Immediately, I found a big old flashlight covered in dust. When I saw that it still worked, and that the one-room cabin was empty, I closed and barred the doors shut behind me. Looking around in the dark with the aid of the flashlight, I found that the cabin had been abandoned for a long time. The table was set as though dinner were about to be served, but the plates were all very dusty. Whoever used to live there left in a hurry, and I was probably the first person to be in that cabin in all the years since. I wished again that I could wake up from this particular dream, as I was finding it a stressful and unhappy one to be dreaming. It was pretty much as cold in that cabin as it was outside, but there was a fireplace. I fiddled around with it to see if the flue was open and, well, I wasn't really sure if it was or not. I'm better with campfires than with fireplaces. Looking around, I could find no firewood inside. There had to be a pile of it around somewhere outside, I reasoned. It was probably under some tarp or some other kind of cover out there. I took the flashlight and I went outside to look around for firewood in the cold night. Well, I did not find firewood, but I did distinctly hear the sound of someone walking through the woods. I held still to locate the direction of the approaching individual, and when I understood where they were coming from, I called out to them. I no longer wished to be alone in that forest. I hoped it was someone with GPS or a working telephone that could rescue me. Once I called out, everything went quiet. I listened for a while, annoyed that whoever it was hadn't acknowledged my SOS. After some more waiting, I decided to call out to them again. This time, as soon as I began, I heard a terribly angry vocalization, followed by a growling noise, like something from a wildlife safari sound effects record. I both heard and saw trees being pushed apart and cracked in places that shouldn't have been crackable. From those woods ran the angry dog-headed demon man that I had seen eating my campsite before. Its eyes looked wild and insane, and I ran as fast as I could back toward the open front door of the cabin. I remember as I ran, it felt like time was standing still. I was running as hard as I could, and yet it was like I was along for the ride in a sense. Maybe the overload of fear and adrenaline separated me from my body, or at least from my personality. I remember thinking stupid thoughts about how I missed my sleeping bag, how unfair it was that I couldn't just go back to sleep, and other such childishness. I remember promising myself that if I lived to tell this story, I would never bite my tongue when my father said something annoying ever again. When you think you're about to leave this mortal coil, you'll promise yourself the strangest of things. And while time was slowed down, it felt like I was running for that cabin for about a decade or 11 years, so I had a lot of time to think up dumb things to promise myself. Once I actually got back inside that cabin, though, all of my awareness was focused on grabbing that old wooden door and slamming it shut, then catching the bouncing board and closing it again so that I could begin the process of latching and bolting the door. Before even one of them got latched, though, the Dogman had caught up to me and bounded onto the door. My feet got knocked straight out from under me, but as I fell on my butt, my back wedged against the table nailed to the floor. My legs got splayed out in front of me. So as the Dogman pushed the top half of the door in, my feet pushed the bottom of the door shut. The Dogman bounced back for just a few seconds, but my completely focused mind and body responded with an uncluttered mind and some nimble finger work. On my knees, I got the door locked before that massive but unintelligent monster was able to recover and attack again. I pushed my back against the door, bracing myself for the animal's inevitable charge. I was hyperventilating, and I was feeling dizzy. I was seeing spots around the edge of my vision, and tears streamed uncontrollably down my cheeks. I knew the Dogman was going to push that door in, and I knew that was when I would be a goner. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the window in the back of the one-room cabin. I saw the Dogman run past that window. He wasn't about to charge the front door at all. He was circling around to the back. If I went out there again, I might be attacked from any direction. I felt as though the Dogman had me trapped, and so I looked around for a way to make my prison a little more comfortable. There was a dusty old blanket on the bed, but it was crawling with bed bugs. I could see them with my naked eye. I sat on a wooden chair in the middle of the floor, and I thought warming thoughts. I imagined a warm day in Hawaii, and I imagined a fireplace. Yes, it was a warm day in Hawaii that I was spending by the fireplace, okay? I hugged myself, but I couldn't stop myself from shivering. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the Dogman racing up to the cabin, bumping the wall with his shoulder, and then running away. Did he expect me to go outside and play fetch with him? What did he want from me? I shivered violently and uncontrollably, certain that I was not fated to survive that night. Each time the Dogman bumped the house, it felt like my heart was going to stop. In the morning, the sound of the birds chirping was so beautiful that my exhausted body and mind wept openly. When I got up the courage to go outside and I eventually found a ranger station later that morning, I just kept laughing and weeping in relief. I went home to my parents' house, a shaken and a lesser man than I was when I left. I am still only in the first stages of recovery from the emotional trauma inflicted on me after Dogman tore up my campsite. Don't go anywhere, we've got another Dogman story. It's the one featured in the thumbnail. But first, I'd like to thank our newest $10 channel member, Tim Sturgill. Every Jack and Jill likes to chill with executive producer Tim Sturgill. There's nobody cooler than him. Which him is him? None other than Tim. Please join me in thanking Tim Sturgill for making this episode possible. And if you'd like to become an executive producer and get to see our secret uncensored Sunday night stories, all you have to do is join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Tim Sturgill did and click that join link under this or any of our videos. And now, our second Dogman story of the day. Grizzly Bear versus the Windell Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I witnessed a battle between two real-life kaiju, and it really blew my mind. I saw a genuine predator turf battle between a grizzly bear and what I could only assume was an actual dogman or werewolf. The only reason I think I survived was because the situation between the two large carnivores was so intense. Neither of them even noticed me until I'd gotten a safe distance away. I'm being forced to call the animal the Windell Werewolf because my wife thinks that makes it sound more memorable. But the event actually took place to the southeast of Windell, which is in British Columbia in Canada. It's just a wee bit north of the United States, not very far. Where I saw the two creatures was at a natural area called Arrow Mountain. I'm a fairly experienced camper and hiker, and I was in the area alone the first week of this year. My wife and I decided we needed a break after the holidays, so we each took off in different directions, her to her mother's house, and me to the wilderness where I hoped to be alone for a while. I do enjoy camping with friends, but this time I went specifically to find some solitude. I know how to camp in such a way that only professional trackers can even notice that I'm in a given area. I don't set campfires, I cover my tracks, there's a whole lot of things. So I was up pretty high on Arrow Mountain, and I was feeling in a state of bliss, just me and nature chilling out together. And then, two very natural creatures came racing and bounding up the hill from below so suddenly and so loudly that I was up and running to my right for cover before I knew what it was that was crashing in my direction. When I felt far enough away and had a large enough tree to hide behind and peek out from, I looked out and saw a huge, squirrel gray colored wolf straining to run uphill. My first thought was dire wolf, just because that was something I had heard about on the Discovery Channel that I thought was a giant prehistoric wolf. I've read since then that they weren't actually as large as the wolf that I saw. This was a gray wolf, almost as big as a horse, basically. I was watching it in profile, struggling to move higher on the hill as fast as it could go, and I wondered where it was going to and why it was in such a rush to get there. Crashing out of the woods behind the huge wolf and to my right in my field of vision was a huge blonde bear. It must have been a grizzly, but this was the granddaddy of all grizzly bears. Seriously, this was an oversized creature chasing another oversized creature. They were both clearly predators, so I must have been witnessing a territorial battle, and the grizzly seemed to be winning. The bear had the prehistoric wolf cornered up to my left, and the wolf turned around to face that charging bear. Then he took my breath away when he stood up on his hind legs, easily doubling his height and creating a very intimidating presence. The grizzly stood up on his hind legs as well, but slid backward on the steep incline, sliding and landing back down on all fours. He tried again and again to match the upright pose of the Dogman, but slipped a little further backward each time. The upright wolf had the most insane expression on its face, and it had its huge paws splayed wide to look almost like hands. I'd only ever seen a cat splay its claws that way before, but this creature appeared to be canine in all other aspects. He was making a horrible racket that I wouldn't exactly describe as barking. It was this sort of howling and yowling that coupled with its body posture and crazy-looking eyes, seemed to be an expression of warning or threatening. It was almost as though he were speaking in complete sentences in some kind of dog language. I don't know exactly what he was saying, but I know it wasn't anything pleasant. When the bear had slid backward significantly enough, the huge gray upright wolf let out a howl that served as a battle cry. He threw himself forward in a charge on all fours toward the suddenly surprised and off-balance bear. Reversing into a hasty and panicked retreat, the two animals sped and leaped and slipped and skidded downhill to my right, causing a bit of a minor avalanche with their thunderous passing. As they both flew downward and out of my view, I saw them go straight off this cliff edge. I don't think they fell very far, but to be honest, I didn't stick around to find out. I think if the two of them fell off the mountain, it might have made the news, but maybe not. Sometimes, coming really close to complete disaster, but getting out of it unharmed, can work out some of the problems in your life, at least in the short term. It's a lot easier to appreciate my fellow human beings since I got home safe after seeing Grizzly Bear versus the Windell Werewolf.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.